Are you ready to jack in your deep dive port and cruise the neural net brain dance style choom? Well, meat brain, you better be packing iron tough enough to dent maelstrom metal, or else you might get zeroed by some no-ganic cyber psycho gonk. If you don't get flatlined by a chrome junkie scrounging for eddies to see the Ripper doc, then you're gonna need an info bro like me. You might end up a very sad brain potato. Plus, I'll introduce you to some preem rimbos. No cap. Remember Cyberpunk 2077? Sure was a big deal when it came out, but not for all the right reasons. It was released in an unfinished state in order to appease investors over the 2020 holiday season, so it was the subject of much ridicule and memery. I played through the opening on a PS4 Pro, knowing it wasn't going to be the best version of the game. I started the Delamain missions until I reached one that was too difficult for me, so I returned to my apartment to find that my next-door neighbor, a depressed cop, had taken his own life because of some irreversible decision I had made by selecting a response in a conversation. Given that the game was dropping frames and looked so much better on PC and next-gen consoles, I put the game on my backlog and I haven't looked back since. I've given up on the PS5 version for the time being. What's the point? I might as well invest in a gaming PC, but for now I just play games on the Switch, like the plebe that I am. Cyberpunk Edgerunners is a limited series, an original net animation, or ONA, based on the game, which is based on the tabletop role-playing game created by Mike Pondsmith in 1988. I've never played a tabletop RPG because despite my killer threads, I'm actually not that cool. But Cyberpunk is like D&D for edgelords. Just look at the 4 tenets which cyberpunks live by. One of them is, always take it to the edge. The original tabletop game was influenced not only by the film Blade Runner, but also by the anime Bubblegum Crisis. My introduction to anime of this style was with Ninja Scroll back in the 90s, though Hideo Kojima compared the show favorably to Yoshiaki Kawajiri's Cyber City OEDO 808, and he knows a lot more about anime than I do. The cyberpunk style is often thought of as beginning with William Gibson's Neuromancer. Just look how much use my copy has gotten. Though Mike Pondsmith didn't read Neuromancer until after he created Cyberpunk 2077. He was more inspired by a sci-fi novel called Hardwired. Edgerunners is a beautifully animated show. There's a reckless creativity to its flashy images. When a character is moving incredibly fast, we get something like a smear frame, but dragged out over a long period of time. A kaleidoscopic view of the action, providing a visual feast for the eyes, full of kinetic energy. The art design resembles the game, but more colorful and pop art inspired. From the dingy tenement hallways of the protagonist's home to the mesmerizing neon glow of Night City, its 2D animation allows for more crisp looking images than the 3D world of the game. The net running scenes are appropriately surreal, blurring the lines between the real and the virtual, the body and the mind. The communication technology from the game, where text is displayed on screen, allows for the dialogue to take place over simpler animations, so that more time and care are spent with the series' excellent action scenes. Edgerunners has a lot of blood. Blood dripping right on the camera. Fountains of blood spewing as characters are torn apart in every direction. There's also excessive nudity. Women in this cyberpunk future sure don't wear many clothes, and I'm here for it. Within the first 5 minutes, there's a shot of simulated sex. If all of this sounds appealing, then check out Cyberpunk Edgerunners, you perverted freak. The writing is punchy and sharp, including all that fun future lingo, technobabble that makes good science fiction so immersive. The terminology is all incorporated in a natural way, where you're going to pick up more on what characters are talking about as long as you're paying close enough attention. Calling someone a choom is like calling them a droog in Clockwork Orange. It's like saying bro. The tone of Edgerunners gets darker as the episodes progress. It tells a story from beginning to end, and will not receive a second season. There are 10 episodes, and each runs for about 25 minutes, including the credits, so it's not a huge investment of time. The episodes go by quickly, never wearing out their welcome, and progress in the plot happens fast. About as fast as the protagonist can move. I watched Edgerunners with an English dub for the sake of providing clean images for the review, and the English voice cast sounds great. Giancarlo Esposito voices one of the major antagonists, and this man can do no wrong when it comes to villainous voice work.
Indeed. Well, it's a pleasure. The name's Faraday.
When I was growing up, anime dubs were usually pretty bad. There's even a charm to some bad dubbing, but nowadays projects are usually considered for release in many languages in the production stage. That being said, it sounds more authentic in Japanese. I like the voices for Main and the Ripper Doc in particular. I was critical of the use of Imagine Dragons for the opening in Arcane, another Netflix show based on a video game, but the use of Franz Ferdinand for Edgerunners works really well for me. It's a rollicking, fist-pumping bop that kicks off each episode with a ton of energy. It's a preem soundtrack choice. There's death metal for the action scenes and cheesy pop music for the melodramatic scenes, so we get a little variety. Some of the songs like Who's Ready for Tomorrow, Major Crimes, and Friday Night Firefight are used throughout the series. Smart move, really getting their use out of the licensed music. I personally enjoy the electronic, synth-heavy instrumentals the most. It's a fun soundtrack. I approve. The style of Edgerunners is hyper-violent and ultra-sexual, yet ultimately its story is aware of how dangerous it can be to indulge in extremes. The world of Cyberpunk is a dystopian one, in which unfettered capitalism has allowed corporations complete control. Violent gangs vie for control of the streets, while corporations wage war against one another for information and advanced technology. It's a deeply emotional tale about a boy becoming a man, and finding his place in a dystopian society. The world of Cyberpunk is not so different from our own. Massive corporations hold all of the power. David is a corpo in training, but he doesn't want to be a suit. His single mother works within the system to provide a better place for him. The whole concept satirizes the way in which our own society is ruled by corporations. Arasaka and Militech are rival corporations chasing after more powerful forms of technology through which they can enforce their rule. Corporate espionage and gang violence are interlinked, as the corporations have fixers like Faraday, who hire gang members and hackers for missions against other corporations. David's mother is killed in a drive-by shooting by a gang called the Animals. He ends up with a piece of highly coveted, military-grade cyberware. Everyone is after this technology, making it the MacGuffin of the series. As David continues to upgrade his cyberware, he slowly loses his humanity. Drugs are necessary in order for the mind to sustain the implementation of cyberware. A chrome fiend without meds is a surefire shot for a one-way trip to complete cyberpsychosis. There's a body horror element in play when it comes to cyberpunk storytelling, in the way that characters become less and less human as they modify their bodies through technology. It's a society where being linked into tech is a necessity, yet it's also an addiction that leads to mental instability. There's also a science fiction angle when it comes to the way that everyone is linked together through technology. David promises his mother he'll purchase the update for school, but they're broke, so he obtains the download illegally and crashes the school's computer. David is a young male archetype. He has no money, no status. He's a rebellious kid who gets bullied at school by the son of a massively wealthy corpo slime. This kid beats up David right after his mother has been shot. His mother survives at first, but she was overworked and they're on the discount healthcare package. David is orphaned due to gang violence, but ends up rising through the ranks of a gang himself, at first wooed by the show's female lead Lucy. She takes him to a virtual moon, and they share a romantic moment with their impossible dreams. Their conflict is that Lucy only befriended David in order to obtain the cyberware, yet they share genuine feelings for one another. All of this is mostly wish fulfillment for teenage boys. David is growing stronger, hanging out with more hot chicks, getting drunk. Episode 4 has the obligatory naked training montage scene. It's a coming-of-age story, but after episode 5, Edgerunners begins to ramp up towards a tragic conclusion. Main is the leader of the crew, and a mentor character for David. He's an over-the-top masculine stereotype with a flat-top haircut and guns that come out of his arms. Dorio is his girl and red right hand. Pilar is a wild and crazy guy. His sister Rebecca is one of those characters that every anime has. The tiny girl who's really violent and loudmouthed and is a best friend character, not a love interest. Kiwi is another netrunner who eventually betrays the team, and Falco is the getaway driver. Faraday is the big bad fixer, and I hope that's enough characters for you. A lot of them end up getting 86 because after all, we are in Night City. David's character arc is that of the sacrificial hero. When the show begins, it's an archetypal chosen one scenario, where David can inexplicably modify his body with technology more than others. Usually, body modification has to be balanced out with immunosuppressants, meaning that the more one implements machinery into the body, the more reliant one becomes on drugs to survive. David modifies his body until he's a hulking monstrosity, becoming his mentor in a literal sense, as he implants Maine's robotic arms. He's told by the Ripper Doc that he has an uncanny tolerance for mods. By the end of the series, he's more machine than man, strapped into a battle gear pumping him full of drugs as he calls down fury upon squad after squad of opponents. It's a power fantasy gone completely delusional. His only choice is to sacrifice himself in order to save Lucy. In the first scene, an unknown character is having a shootout with the cops. It's revealed to be David living out a dark fantasy through virtual reality. A cyber psycho has been zeroed by Max Tack, and David is reliving his memories. The game that David indulges in eventually becomes real as he ends up meeting a similar fate. Once the Ripper Doc installs the powerful cyberware into him, David goes back to school and destroys his bully, wanders around covered in blood, and then takes a nap. Halfway through the series, the freewheeling exuberance of rebellious youth is brought to a halt when Maine goes full cyber psycho and commits suicide by cop. David wants to make a last stand here with his surrogate father. Even in the grips of cyber psychosis, Maine won't let David throw his life away. David later kills an innocent woman while hallucinating. He starts to experience nosebleeds the way Maine did before his death. All Chrome junkies come to a point where they're faced with downgrading. By the end of the series, David is on the brink of cyber psychosis as well, emotionally distant from the woman he loves and drinking too much, contemplatively staring at the skyline with his impossibly massive shoulders. Again, this feels like wish fulfillment for young men, to go from the orphan kid who gets bullied at school to a jacked, brooding anti-hero with a hot hacker girlfriend. Yet in the end, David loses his humanity and his life, so Edgerunners is a cautionary tale as well. Cyberpunk Edgerunners succeeds with stellar animation, fast-paced storytelling, cool character design, and it tells a complete story in approximately 4 hours. Let's go 9 out of 10 for Edgerunners. The animation alone is reason for checking this one out, but it also ends up being an emotional story with serious themes about technology and mental health. That's it for now. Don't forget that no one loves a corpo-climbing simp, and never trust a soul in Night City. Not even me. Is that some kind of paradox?